Opinions expressed on ACB Media are those of the respective program contributors and cannot be assumed to serve as endorsements of products or views by the American Council of the Blind, its elected officials, or its staff.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to Cooking with the Blind Kitchen. My name is Debra Erickson, and I am the executive chef and founder of the Blind Kitchen. And if you have any questions about that, I can tell you that more. But the reason I'm here tonight is to lead a discussion on cooking with vision loss. And at the end of last month's session, someone asked if I could speak about sautéing and the principles involved with that. So I am a trained chef. I was the only blind student in culinary school, so I do know a little bit about blind cooking. So in order to talk about, and the other thing is I'm going to start, I'll probably talk for 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how much comes into my brain. But then I'd like to open the floor to questions for the remainder of the session so that if you have questions about sautéing, something that I've spoken about, or you can go anywhere you want. I want to go where the group wants to go. And cooking is as varied as anything, as dressing, or, we all have our different style, our different preferences. And so I want to go where the people in this room are. So talk about sautéing. So sauté is a French term, and it means to jump. And in order to explain what sautéing is, I need to tell you what it's not, in addition to it, to compare it to other cooking methods. So sautéing is not cooking with water or a water-based liquid. You're using a fat as your base. So boiling or simmering involve having the, oh, I've got to mute my phone. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. So if it's hot liquid touching the food that is not a fat or steam that is cooking it, that is not sautéing. That's going to be boiling or simmering. And if it's only the steam hitting the food and there's no liquid actually in touch with the food, with the steaming food, then you're steaming. Now, let's go back to the fats. So when you are cooking in fat, if you are cooking in a lot of fat, like where you might have a chicken breast in there and it's filled up goes halfway up the chicken breast, and then you need to flip it to cook the other side, that's called pan frying. And that is not sautéing because that's a lot of fat. And even more fat used in cooking is deep frying, where the food is immersed in hot oil and it's that hot liquid that is cooking the food. And that is also not sautéing. Sautéing is just a little bit of fat that you're cooking the food in. The heat comes from the heat source through the pan, and it is going to be the thing that actually cooks the food. And actually, fat, unlike water, carries a lot of flavor with it generally, unless you're using like a neutral oil. So before I talk about equipment, I want to talk about fats because that's got to be understood. So fats are oils or butter, or it can be lard that comes from an animal. But different fats and different oils have different, what they call smoke points and flash points. So you've got to be very aware, especially if you have vision loss and you can't see what's going on in the pan, if the oil's smoking or not, like that. You have got to use science and technique to be able to make sure that you aren't going to set your house on fire. And you're not going to do that because I'm going to help give you some of the principles. So different types of fat, and you can ask your smart speaker these questions. What is the smoke point of olive oil? And they'll give you the amount. What is the smoke point of butter, which is much lower? And you don't want to ask the flash point because that means it's bursting into flames. You want to find out where the smoke point is so you can monitor that sometimes with a talking thermometer, but you're going to be able to do it just through timing and experience. So some fats have very low smoke points. That would be butter. It has a lot of milk solids in it and sugars, and it will brown quickly and it will burn quickly. So that's not a bad thing. It's one of the most flavorful fats you can eat. But you just have to be aware of that, that if it's got a low smoke point, you probably don't want to put your heat on high because you're going to burn your butter pretty quickly that way. It's knowing the science of this helps us, especially if we can't see it. Having the knowledge arms us in a better way and makes us much better able to handle things. Something like bacon fat, extremely flavorful, but also a very low smoke point. So you're not going to want to cook it. You're not going to want to cook French fries in pork fat because it is going to catch on fire before your food can cook. But there are a lot of oils out there that have very high ones. Olive oil is relatively high, and it has flavor in it as well. I'm sure you've been to restaurants where you dip bread in just the olive oil and the balsamic vinegar, and so it definitely has a flavor. But the ones that are best to, if you're wanting to be as safe as you can be, is to like use a peanut oil because it has an extremely high flash point or smoke point. And so, depending on where your comfort level is, ask your smart speaker of whatever fat you want to use to saute in. And remember, sauteing means a little bit of fat. That's what makes it different from the other types of frying. So, when you choose your oil, whatever you're comfortable with, it's important to know that. So let's go now to some of the principles of sautéing. So sautéing means to jump, and you're going to be moving that food around the pan. You don't sauté a steak, even though you cook it in the same pan. You may cook it in the same fat that you might choose for another thing. It is not a little piece of food that you are moving around constantly. You are going to be grilling that or charring it. It's so big pieces of food are not sautéed. And you don't want to move a steak around when you're cooking. You want to make sure it gets that crispy charred thing when you go to flip it over. So you don't want to move it. So that is not sautéing. So in sautéing, generally, you can use whatever pan you like, but you don't want to use a deep pan, because if you use a deep pan, when the moisture escapes from the food, and chicken has moisture, vegetables have moisture, it's going to be released as steam. And if your pan is too deep, you're going to be steaming your food instead of sautéing it. It's going to be that hot steam that's coming out of it, even though it's in the oil. It's going to cook it quicker than that steam oil because it's going to be a higher temperature. So you need to be aware that you should not use a deep pan, but a shallow pan. And so for cooking with vision loss, I have a tip for people that I didn't know this existed for a long time. They have something called a shallow sauté pan, and they're made of different types of metals, but the difference between them and a normal saute pan, and they come in different sizes, is that instead of the sides being sloped, the sides come straight up. So when I'm moving my food around the pan, sauteing it, the little pieces, which it's easy to lose track of little pieces when you can't see them, instead of going up the slope and off the off ramp that I call it in those pans, it's going to hit a wall because you're going to have to really try to pick that food up, and they're usually about 3 inches tall. So that is a really good pan to invest in. And the other thing you want to get if you're going to invest in a pan, and I don't sell these pans, so this is not I'm not looking for sales in this one, but you want to get a heavy bottom pan, and they're usually made out of 3 or 4 layers if they're a heavy bottom, because if you only have like an aluminum pan that has a thin single bottom, you can have different thicknesses in that, especially if the pan is old, where you're not getting an even distribution of heat. That's not a great pan. It's great because it heats up really quickly. That's a good thing, but it also you can get uneven. You just can't be sure. But with a heavy bottomed shallow saute pan, you are going to know that it's pretty much even all the way across. It takes longer to heat up, but that's okay. We're going to allow plenty of time to cook. And but the the balance to there is that it's very slow to cool down as well. So if I'm cooking and I hear like it gets louder than I'm comfortable with, and I do count on my ears a lot for cooking, and it's getting loud where my heart's starting to pound. Like, okay, that's I don't like it that high. It's too hot. Of course, I'm going to turn down the knob, but the quickest way to to cool that pan down until you're ready to put it back on the heat source is to lift it completely up and off the heat source. That's going to be your quickest. If you leave it on the heat source and you turn it down, it's going to take 30, 45, maybe a minute to start for that hot surface to cool down and for the pan to be able to reflect that. So there's a cook sauteing tip there. If it gets too loud for your comfort zone, lift the pan straight up off the stove and just hold it in the air. You're not done cooking. You're just stopping the cooking, slowing the cooking down until you can get it back under manageable things. So another thing I'm going to put out here, and I don't want to install fear in anyone, but there's another great tool that you can get. So if you're afraid that maybe you're new to cooking and you're just not sure and you can't see, what if you don't understand what burning fat smells like, and now all of a sudden you suspect you have a fire? There's a tool called the Flame Tamer, and it is a fiberglass blanket, and you keep it in your kitchen, not near the stove, because you don't, if you suspect there's a fire, that's the last place you want to be, is feeling around the cupboards on top of the stove. And you just take it and you throw it over your stovetop. It's larger than most standard size stovetops, and what it does is it stops the oxygen flow to the fire, and it will extinguish the flame without any trouble, any danger. It's way better than a fire extinguisher, because what the heck are we pointing at? And the mess afterwards is a nightmare. And also even like baking soda, which is also does the same function as a fire extinguisher. It's going to cut the oxygen flow to the flame, which will make the flame go out. But this blanket does it without all that mess. And you've got a large area for error. If you don't get it exactly right over the pan, it's a big enough blanket that you're going to get it over the pan, even if it's not exactly. So for some people, especially people that are new to cooking, that is a really good tool to have on hand, to just for your confidence, that you say, okay, something happens, I'm ready to go. And just as a disclaimer, if you put it on and you still suspect that there might be a fire, then either call for help or go outside, call 911. It's not worth your life for a fire. So I just want to put that disclaimer, but it's going to put out 99% of fires that might happen inside of a pan or on a stovetop. So now you know what fat you're working with and what the smoke point is. And the fat you choose will depend on if you're wanting to use it to add more flavor, or if it doesn't matter for the flavor, you want the food to taste exactly like it tastes, then you can use the neutral oils like vegetable oil, corn oil, canola oil, peanut oil. These all have high smoke points, and they're not going to impart flavor on your food. So it just depends on what you're cooking and what result you want. So in sautéing, the other thing that's really important is that the pieces are consistently sized so that they cook at the same time. If you have a huge chunk of, let's say you're sautéing chicken, and you've got a really big piece that's like 2 inches around, and then now you've got a little tiny piece, you have them in the same pan, in the same fat, at the same temperature, that little one's going to cook a lot faster than the big one. And before the big one can even be done, that little one will probably burn. So consistency in size and thickness of whatever you're trying to cook is extremely important. Also, you can't saute some foods. You really can't saute carrots. They take way too long to cook. They're going to start burning because they're so dense before the inside. You could do little thin slices of carrots. It's not something traditionally done, but you're not going to want to do, carrot coins that are normal size. Sautéing is not a good cooking method for all foods, but it's a good cooking method for a lot of foods, and especially like Swiss chard or broccoli. And broccoli is actually a little bit controversial because the florets of the broccoli are much likely to cook a lot faster than the stems that they're attached to. So there are some thoughts to think about there. If you're okay with the crunchy stem, you're good with those. So I'm going to go back now to the cookware and the order you put it on. So now you've selected your pan, whatever that is that works for you, and you've got the pan on. You don't want to add your oil or fat before the pan is hot. And because you want to be able to control that oil. So if the pan is heating up, you can't touch that oil in the bottom of the pan to find out if it's hot enough yet or whatever. It's much safer to heat up the pan to where you want it. And some people talk about, sprinkle a few drops of water to know if it's ready or not. You don't have to do that. You can tap the top of the rim of your pan for just a second. You can touch it, and that's actually how you can also center it on the stove. That's another thing we could talk about if you wanted to. But let's say the pan is centered, you're heating it up, you're touching it. You can touch the top of that rim for just a second. You're not going to come away burnt because it's going to cool immediately when your finger comes away from the pan and is in contact with cool air. You cannot touch the oil in the bottom of the pan or the food in the pan because that liquid, whatever you touch, is going to come back with your finger and continue to burn. So knowing that principle that you can touch the top of a pan for just a second, no matter how hot it is, and you won't come away burnt. So that's a real key. So that's one thing you can do instead of doing the water test or whatever, because people can see water, the little droplets bounce or whatever, or the sheen of the oil or whatever. You don't need to. You can just touch. And so then you're going to want to put your liquid in. And of course, you're going to keep it in an amount that you're going to want it to cover the bottom of the pan, but we're not pan frying or deep frying. We just want a little bit, and that less oil makes it healthier. So you can use a tablespoon. We've got a tool in the Blind Kitchen called an auto measure spout. It goes on an oil bottle, and you turn the bottle upside down, and it dispenses a tablespoon and then automatically stops. It's a real game changer. I use mine all the time. And if you need a second tablespoon because your pan is pretty big, you're feeding a lot of people, you can turn that over again. And another thing here, so if you want the flavor of butter or the flavor of the bacon grease in, if you mix a fat that has a very low smoke point with a fat like a olive oil or a mazola or corn oil or whatever, that fat protects the higher oil one, brings the smoke point up on those other ones. It protects it from burning longer. So you can actually add flavor, but you need to have one of the high smoke point oils be at least half of what you put in there. And then there are different tools for sautéing. And with sautéing, you're generally not flipping the food over. It's not like pancakes. It's not like eggs. It's not like pork chops. You are just jumping. The food is jumping around the pan. You are moving it around the pan pretty much constantly while you're doing this. And depending on how thick the food is and how dense it is, some are going to cook for it. Some foods are going to cook for longer times than others. And so you just want to have the same kind of food in there, cook it, get yourself a fork, stab around for a little till you can poke it. Use a pair of double spatula because that works kind of like tongs, or you can use tongs to reach in there until you can grab a piece. You can get the information when you're squeezing it, and you just keep testing it. So those are the principles of sautéing. I would say if you are using a spatter screen for any food, then your food is cooking way too high. With sautéing and with 90% of cooking, you don't need a high flame. A lot of people with vision loss are very afraid of making their friends and family sick because they undercook the food. And so they go the other direction and they overcook it. And that's good that they don't make people sick with it, but that's not the outcome they want. They want a delicious, well-seasoned, well-cooked food. And you can do that 90% of the time over a medium to medium low or medium high. It depends on what pan you're using, your stovetop, the ambient temperature of the room that you're in. But you can listen. And I literally, when I hear it sizzle too loud, and it takes a little practice to figure this out, my heart starts going, and I pick that pan right up right away because then the chances of me rescuing that food are a lot greater than if I say, "Oh, don't pay attention to your instinct, Deborah. You know, it's probably okay." I never do that. I always pay attention to my instinct. So, I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. Could we open up the floor to questions?
Sure, let's get some hands up, guys. Jeff, go ahead, please.
Hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, my question does not pertain to sautéing, so I'm willing to go to the back of the line if you would like me to.
I'm fine with it if everybody else is.
So my question is simple. So without using the A lady, Deborah, do you have a recommendation on an app or a tool that I could use to listen to a recipe in my kitchen while I'm cooking? Because what I literally do is I pull up my Microsoft Notepad and I literally travel between the kitchen and my den, read a few lines, memorize it, walk back, do my thing, come back, read it again, in order for me to do that. So other than the A lady, do you have a recommendation? That's number one. And then number two, do you have a recommendation on a good cookbook that we could use? Again, hands-free ideally. So it'd be whether it's an Audible book, whether it's a book you wrote to recommend, because so many times I'll Google recipes, and I think we all could relate to this. By the time you get through the advertisements and jump around and everything else, you lose your mind and you just say, forget it. And then you just wing it. So thank you again so much for leading us in these conversations. These are fantastic.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoy it. So recipe reading is difficult, and I've got a couple of strategies. So first of all, in a commercial kitchen, you're not allowed to have your iPhone, you're not allowed to have a tablet, and you're not allowed to have a computer because of health standards. So it was a real problem. So this one's a little technical, but a lot of you are very good at being blind and have done it for a long time. A Victor Reader Stream is a really good choice. You have to prepare the document ahead of time, step by step, but those keys are very tactile. I was able to keep mine in a Ziploc bag when I was in culinary school, which also kept it dry when you're cooking. You know, you can spill liquids and things can happen, or your fingers might be a little wet. Not very good for electronics as a rule. And so then I was able to just play the document and hit the pause and play button step by step. But it took the advanced work of me getting it in order. So the other way I am able to access recipes without the A lady, and I do use her, there's no doubt about it, but she's not 100%. Sometimes she loses where she's at. So in that case, what I do is create a document and an email step by step, and I use voiceover. So when I'm ready to go to the next step, I swipe right. Okay, do that step. Go to the next recipe, I swipe right. And here's the other thing about recipes. So all of these require advanced work. Welcome to the blind world. There's a lot of times things are not made easy for us. So when I am preparing that document for the Victor Reader Stream or in the email that I'm going to send to myself and then swipe, swipe, swipe as I need it, I am going to, if it says add a half a cup of vegetable oil to the cake batter or whatever, and then when I get down to the step where it says add the vegetable oil, I'm going to insert that half a cup. So now I don't have to back swipe to go back up to how much oil do I need, how many eggs, how much sugar. It's all going to be contained in the steps of the directions. So that's a real helpful thing. And I don't know a lot about cookbooks that are accessible. I know if you go on Bard, and there are quite a few. There's one, America's Test Kitchen, Cooking for Two. Oh, they've got some really good recipes in there where you don't, they're just wonderful. And if you're cooking for more, you could definitely do it. But those are all pretty navigatable through your either talkback or voiceover. So so those are my suggestions. Get them off the Bard Library because Bard Library has got them set up in a way we can navigate them, whereas other websites do not. So I hope that I do not have the cookbook written yet. I'm in the process of it. We have a newsletter where I submit a recipe every month where people can get it, and I write it in very blind-friendly terms. For example, like when I just talked, I move the amount of the ingredients into the instructions. You get them at the beginning, so you know that if you have it or not. But then you get them again in the instructions. And I also, for each step of the recipe, I give any of, just like the stuff I did with sautéing, anything that has to do with science or timing that's going to help you to do that step. And I also include the tools that I use to complete that step, because we have almost 100 now tools, and not one of them is just a pot or a pan. They're all going to be especially helpful for people with vision loss who are cooking. So that I hope that answered your question. But someday I'm going to make that into a cookbook, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to make it accessible all the way. But technology is changing so much. It's kind of insane. The Meta glasses. I can take those and look at one of my order forms and say, "Hey Meta, what date was this ordered?" And it can go through and find it. I haven't tried with recipes yet, and I need to do that. I'm writing a blog about how to use them in the kitchen, where I might be able to say, "Hey Meta, how many eggs are in this recipe?" And so I'm hoping that will be an additional tool. Except I can't afford eggs, so forget that. So I hope that answered your question.
It does. Do you mind repeating again what the titles? I heard Cooking for Two was one of the books. It sounded like there was a second one.
Yeah, so that one, it's America's Test Kitchen
Got
puts
it.
that out. That's what you heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Thank you so much. And then do you feel like if you were to use the meta glasses, I have heard, that there are some accuracy issues with the meta glasses.
Sure.
Have you found, maybe you haven't tried it yet, like wearing those and then printing out a hard copy of the recipe, having Meta read you the recipe? That might be kind of clunky though.
Don't know. I haven't done that yet. It's a good point. And probably some recipes lend themselves better to that technology and the way those algorithms are run. That's part of the stuff I'm excited to learn about, but I just haven't had a whole lot of time to delve into it yet.
Perhaps if you did something like step 1, colon, blah, 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 step 2, colon, and then you say, hey, Meta, read step 2, hey, Meta, read step 3,
Well,
perhaps.
yep. And that's how my recipes are, by the way.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Deborah. I really, really appreciate it. Appreciate it so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Thank
Our
you.
next hand is Connie. Go ahead, please, Connie. You're muted.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
So I heard you on ACB Families, I believe. And anyway, my name is Connie, and I have two questions. My first question is, what's the difference between sautéing and stir frying? And my second question is, as you're moving the food around the pan, how do you keep from knocking it out of the pan onto the stove or, outside
Right.
of the pan?
No, it's a real problem. So one thing you can use is, instead of using this, so first of all, I'm going to start with a wok for stir frying. I think they are worthless for us because gravity's going to pull the food back down that you put on the edge when you're stir frying something else in the middle, and then you're supposed to move the food up to the wall, the sloped wall of the pan.
Right.
It's not a good plan. So I don't use woks for that reason, even though they're very good tools. I haven't found a way to do it without vision that makes sense.
And it gets so hot.
It does. And so
Yeah.
it's a good question. So stir fry is generally done quite hot. And you're also doing it with a variety of ingredients. So stir frying is sautéing. It absolutely is, but it's at a higher temperature than I think you need to, because people want to do it really quick and whatever.
It scares me.
Me too. And so what I do is, my stir fries involve, I may stir fry. So first of all, things cook at different rates and I can't see what's happening in that pan. And I don't want to overcrowd it because now I'm going to be steaming it. It's the food's own liquid is going instead of the oil cooking it. So I cut up all my ingredients, my peppers, my mushrooms, my onions, my garlic, my meat. I have it all ready to go.
Right.
And that's key. That is key for cooking with vision loss. And it's also a key for other people too, because part of the problem with a lot of people cooking, and this is especially with vision loss, but with other people too, is you're really not ready to cook. If I have to find an ingredient in my refrigerator and the stovetop, I can hear it sizzling, and I don't want to be problem solving which bottle is that one in if I haven't labeled them correctly, or I didn't put it back, or somebody didn't put it back. I want that bottle on the counter with me in advance of me cooking, just so that I know I'm not going to have to problem solve where the heck did it go.
Yeah.
But I cook my mushrooms and then I set them in a dish to the side, and I do a large enough dish that while they're cooling, they're not going to steam. They'll cool immediately, and then I'll do my broccoli. And when it's done, then I add it to that dish, because by that time the mushrooms are cool, and I distribute these. And then at the end, when I'm done, usually most people do their protein last. And so I stir fry that, and then I take all the other ingredients and put them back in the pan. Make sure you have a pan large enough, and it'll take just a second to rewarm them. You can add your sauce to it, and you're good to go. That's the whole idea, is cooking them, not necessarily in batches, but each ingredient by itself, so that you're getting a common cooking time.
And then you
can
don't
keep
crowd
track.
everything in one pan.
Right. That's what steams it, and then it's no longer sautéed. You've now steamed it.
Yeah.
And they're
Okay.
soggy.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Melissa, go ahead, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I talked with you the last time that you did this program. You were talking about grilling, and I was asking questions about the George Foreman and
Oh, yeah.
things like that. Yeah, that's me. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks for coming back.
Oh, you bet. I love these calls. This is really great. But I have a question. So is sautéing the same thing as browning, like browning hamburger meat? Is that the same thing? Because I do that all the time.
So sautéing it means you're cooking small pieces of food, generally in a small amount of oil, and pretty quickly. You're not roasting or, having them go for hours and hours.
I
So
see.
browning, it also means, the word sauté means to jump. So actually, when you are browning a hamburger, you're griddling it, which is kind of like
Ah,
grilling. Yeah, but the food is in contact. You're not moving it around. You're gonna only flip it one time if you've got it right. So you're actually griddling. And so, just as long as we're talking about the difference between grilling and griddling, is grilling means the flame, whether it's the heat from charcoal or the flame of your grill, it's actually the heat source is touching the food, like
right.
for a steak or something like that. Griddling is kind of the same kind, except that there is a protective layer. You're griddling usually in a pan or on a hot surface. There is no open flames coming up between the the racks to touch your food. So that's the difference between grilling and griddling. And sautéing really would be smaller amounts of food. So if you are browning ground meat or ground turkey, then now you're sautéing. It's small pieces of food that you're pretty much in a small amount of fat that you're moving around very frequently.
Ah, okay. And then I have a couple of suggestions for future topics to maybe consider.
Oh, good.
So one of those is, okay, so here's my problem, and I'm laughing for a good reason. When I was at the Orientation Training Center here in Seattle, they taught us how to make pancakes and make stuff that you have to flip over. Well, as blind people, flipping over is something we just struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
Now my problem is that several years later, in 2021, I injured both of my hands and my wrists from doing my job that I did at the Lighthouse for the Blind. I was a production worker. but now twisting and doing things with my hands, it's gotten more and more difficult for me. And so I'm hoping that in the future you can talk about how to flip something over like pancakes, because like I said, as a totally blind person, that's hard to do. And in fact, my teacher that I used to have, she's passed on now, but I remember she told me one time, she said, and she was a Southern lady just like me from Florida. I'm from Mississippi and she was from Florida. But she would say to me, "Now, Melissa, those pancakes look like roadkill because you flipped them the wrong way." So I think it'd be good to talk about that. And how you can do it so you're not, like hurting yourself, because I don't want to hurt my wrist any more than what I have. And I think it would be great for you to share your own personal story on a call about what it was like for you to go to culinary school as a blind person. Because I have a friend, a dear friend. She had her own catering business there for a while, but she was the only totally blind student in her culinary school. And she graduated, and they didn't turn her down. They just said, come on down, and we'll work with you. Um, and she's still, to this day, I don't think she owns her business anymore, but she still is very, very active in the Washington Council. But I think it'd be great to hear your own personal story on a future call as well.
Okay, if other people want that, we can definitely go that way. But thank you for those ideas. But I'm going to put it out here. I don't know much about physical limitate. That's not my specialty, but it
Well,
doesn't
sure.
mean other people in the room might also have limitations that they figured out how to do it. So
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
keep that in mind. I'll keep my, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of presentations where people can, often put suggestions out there and say, hey, I've got that problem too. So I'm glad you
And
brought it up.
what's that newsletter you were talking about? I'd love to sign up for that.
Okay, you can either write to me at info@theblindkitchen.com, or you can go on the website and and you can subscribe to the newsletter. It's very screen friendly and
Awesome.
magnifier friendly.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to subscribe, but thank you so much again, and God bless.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Our next hand is phone number 970 ending in 057.
Hi, my name is Estelle. This is my first time to your show, and I'm really excited about learning what you're doing.
Welcome.
The previous person was talking about browning ground meat. I usually do that, and it's usually a package that was in the freezer, and I know that it's a good idea to defrost it first, so it'll evenly ready to use. But I just wanted to know more or less, how do I know? And I have to kind of move it around in the pan and turn it over, and it takes me a while. But how do I know for sure when it's done?
Okay, it's a really good question, especially with poultry, if you're doing ground turkey or ground chicken. Because people can eat ground beef that's rare. They order steaks all the time, but you're never going to order medium rare chicken. It's just not a thing for a good reason, because you could get hurt. So again, if you were talking sautéing, so you're right in on topic. You put with hamburger, you don't have to put a shallow layer, because usually hamburger, even if it's 93.7, has enough fat that you don't want to add anymore. It's fine. It'll be fine, and you'll hang on to all that flavor rather than adding a neutral oil that will help dilute it, because it doesn't have any flavor. But you definitely need to add a neutral oil to ground chicken or ground turkey. But the thing is again, those shallow saute pans, those little pieces want to go up and off the sides. And so you definitely want those walls to catch it. That was a game changer for me once I discovered those. The other thing is doing it from frozen, there's no way I would recommend that. I think if you can't see it, the stuff that so the outside of your frozen lump is going to defrost and cook faster. It's going to start browning. It's going to start caramelizing. It's going to start cooking while and the cook time is relatively short for small pieces of food like that. So they're going to start to be overdone long before that center part of it ever thaws. So I wouldn't recommend that. I don't have a strategy for that other than keep flipping it as much as you can. But still, as those pieces fall off, how are you going to track all of that going on in the pan with that big lump in the
Right.
center? So
Right.
the other thing I do is I crumble that thing up. If I have a big piece of like a meatball sized piece of hamburger and then little pieces of hamburger, those little pieces are going to cook long before that meatball size. So I crumble it. I use my fingers. I crumble the meat into the pan and before I turn it on so that I can check it. I put the oil in if I need to, but if it's uh, hamburger or beef, I don't. And then I break it up and use my fingers to make sure it's in kind of a single layer on the bottom, and then I turn the heat on. So that yeah, I when I could see, cooking it frozen was a nightmare. So doing it without being able to see, you can always defrost it in your microwave, a little bit, like yeah, cooking it like 10% or whatever. But I do understand sometimes you get home, you're like, oh shoot, I forgot to take that out. But
Right.
but it happens. It definitely happens. But it's going to make it much more less predictable for you and probably less chance of the successful outcome that you want. But the other thing I want to say about ground beef meat, and you can't use a talking thermometer because the pieces are too small to know if it's reached 165 degrees. But I think it's over feared because I have never been served a dish of turkey crumbles, or a dish of chicken crumbles, almost always that meat is going to be cooked further, like in maybe tacos or in chili that or spaghetti sauce, that it's going to be cooked further. So in a sauce. So the chances of you making your friends or family sick from crumbles is probably pretty low if you're going to continue to cook it into a sauce that will of course bring the temperature up and cook it further.
Right, but I don't do that. I brown the meat and then I add it to my salad that I've already had everything else in it. And then I
Okay.
just want to add some of the ground meat, the browned ground meat into the salad.
Okay.
So
Then you got to
I
be more
just
careful. You're right. That's a different application.
So how do I know for sure when it's done? You did mention earlier about listening to the sound, and I think that I can detect a different sound when it's more done. But is there any other tips you have for knowing when that meat is actually cooked enough?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. Number one, smell the raw meat immediately while it's still cold. Raw meat has a very different smell than cooked meat. So get that
Okay.
fresh in your brain. Like, okay, this is what blood smells like. This is what, it's going to be a very different smell and it's not a pleasant thing to do, but you're asking for the other strategy and that would be what it is. So now you're using smell and sound to know if it's getting up to it. And if you it's very hard to not to I would cook it a little past where you think it is, where you think it should
Oh,
be, and it's going to be time and temperature and your preferences. But I don't have anything more than that on that.
well, I appreciate that. Those are good ideas. Thank you very much. And could you just repeat once again that email for the newsletter?
Yeah,
It
so if
was
you
it.
go right to info at
Uh-huh.
theblindkitchen.com, and I'll get your
Okay.
name added to it so you'll automatically receive it.
And how often do you send that out?
We send it out once a month and it's relatively short. We have a very high open rate and a very low unsubscribe. We know we're on the right track because we have a tip of the month, which doesn't involve buying anything. We have that just a lot of the tips I'm giving you tonight. We have a tool of the month, which is we're hoping you go to the website and buy it if it's something that you think you might use. And then we have a recipe of the month, which I love doing. They take forever, but it's so much fun doing them because I'm teaching while I'm doing those. And then that all gets linked to our website, so it's easy to follow the links. And then we have different things like if I'm doing presentations that other people can attend, um, or doing, a keynote speech or something like that, then and you want to, you know, look at those. That gives you the links as how to attend that presentation if it's a topic that's of interest to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for doing this. It's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it.
And at the moment, we don't have any hands. So if you have a question, get those hands up. Sugar, go ahead, please.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi, Sugar.
I would like for you to talk about how, and I have found these very useful when I'm in the kitchen, because I'm one of those who like to have everything out before I start cooking, instead of, like you mentioned, going around searching for what I need while my food is cooking. I would like to have you talk about your kitchen trays and how useful those can be for some of us who like to gather our items together before we start cooking. And what's the use of them and how can they benefit us?
Thank you for that question, Sugar. They're work trays. They are standard cafeteria trays that you'd see in a school or a hospital or a jail. They're virtually indestructible. They're very tough. I use mine for a cutting board. I don't cook without one of those. I use it for organizing. I use it for cleaning. And let me explain how. So these are cafeteria trays. They're just like the ones you've seen at fast food places. We send one dark one and one light one. And the way they are used is, first of all, if I need to pour a cup of milk, can I do that without spilling? Of course I can. But sometimes I spill. And sometimes when I used to be able to see, sometimes I'd accidentally knock something over. So we're not the only ones that own spilling things. It happens to sighted cooks as well. So if I am, let's say I'm measuring that cup of milk and I get distracted or something like that, and now all of a sudden it overflows. I'm like, oh goodness, now it's running across the counter, down the front of my cupboards, onto the floor. It's a mess I've got to clean up. It's not fun. But if I'm working over one of these work trays, it's got those sloped edges. And in general, for most foods, wet or dry, it contains a spill. And if I have a funnel handy and that tray was clean when I was using the milk, I can generally direct the contents of that tray pretty cleanly back into the bottle where I don't have that kind of waste.
Thank you.
Well, Deborah, we don't have any. Oh, wait a minute. We have one more hand. Jeff, go ahead, please.
Hi, I have a quick one. It's not sauteing, but it's in the same, I think the same ballpark. So if I wanted to make a good toasted sandwich and I'm making it on the stove, do you have any tips or tricks on how to best do that? Obviously, a panini maker has two sides and you're compressing the sandwich and heating both sides. But do you have any tips on how to do that with just a pan on the stove?
Deborah, we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm not hearing Deborah.
Me neither.
And she's
Can
unmuted.
you hear me?
Now we can.
Oh, yeah, you can. Okay.
Okay.
So the George Foreman grill and the panini press are really good. Rest in peace, George Foreman, because you have made the lives of blind people, many of us, much more enjoyable and safer. But you're right. Sometimes you want to cook it on top of the stove. So I've got a couple of things. And what you've got to think about is your toaster. You're toasting bread. And we all know when we take a piece of bread out of the bag, it's a little bit squishy. It's a little bit moist. It smells like a little bit yeasty. And when you put it in the toaster, we've all experienced it. When it hits 337 degrees, the sugars start to caramelize. That's called the Maillard effect. It's predictable. It's science. So that way, when you can smell it, the food dries out. The bread does. It gets like a nuttier, a whole different smell to it when the heat is applied. And you use those same principles when you are toasting bread on a stovetop. So you've got your fillings in it. You're going to use whatever fat. And because the bread toasts quickly, like in a toaster. It's what, like 2 minutes or something like that, depending on how brown you want it. You can use just butter for that particular. It's not sautéing. Again, it's griddling, but it's the same principle. You're using fat to cook the food, direct contact with the fat. And what you're gonna do is you are going to use your sense of smell. You'll smell the toast part of it. It will change from bread to toast and on both sides. I would also suggest that you get a double spatula. There are a lot of different models. The one we have in the blind kitchen we chose it because number one, it's stainless steel. So it's gonna never rust or stain and easy to clean. But the other thing is so what a double spatula is it is like a rectangle on the bottom, and it's like maybe 3 inches wide and 4 inches long. So you got your rectangle, but it also has a rectangle on the top. And for ours, we chose a smaller rectangle. So it's all one piece that they don't come apart. But when I when I smell it and I think it's done enough, and there's no law that says you can't, if you flip it too soon, that you can't flip it back if you decide that it's not done enough. But I slide that double spatula underneath, and then with just a very gentle pressure of my thumb on top of it, I push the smaller rectangle down, and this is flipping food. And now it's working more like a tong. Now I've got that bread trapped on that bottom rectangle with the other one holding it. And when I go to flip it, now I've got an educated guess that if I don't move my hand and I pick it up straight up and now I'm flipping it straight down again, I'm probably going to get it real close to the same place in the pan. Educated guess, maybe not, but chances are I am. And the more I practice, the better I'm going to be able to do this. And the reason the rectangle on the top is smaller is because if it was the same size, it'd be really hard for me to get that bread out of there because it's the same size. I'd have to go around that rectangle somehow. But with it being smaller, it's much easier to deposit it back into the pan, and then I'm ready to go on the other side. That toasted smell is going to lessen because now you've put the raw bread down there, the untoasted bread. And again, you're going to use your nose, you're going to use the sound of it to make sure that it is indeed still sizzling just a little bit because butter burns fast, bread burns fast, and that's the best way. That's the way I found that works for me to cook it. And then eventually you learn the timing of it. Whatever, it depends on what pan you use, how high the heat is. You'll learn what your dance is with that grilled cheese until you get it right, and you'll get it right.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
We're at the 8 minute mark here, Deborah, and I've got 2 hands up.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Sure.
Mary Lee, go ahead, please. You're muted.
Okay. Hi, Deborah. It's Meryl Lee.
Is this the Mary Lee that I've communicated with before?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I've emailed with you and I've purchased some of your products.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Question has to do with, I love your newsletter and your products. So I'm a happy camper.
Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it.
I've been blind most of my life, and I've been cooking, since I was in college. But many things I don't know one can learn. So even, those of us who have been doing this, it's always refreshing to hear. Tonight I learned really the official definition of sautéing. So good stuff.
I loved culinary school for that stuff.
So my question is about pouring. Yeah, I know that's not typically what, the regular household cook knows, but
right.
Pouring oil. I was making a marinade for a flank steak. and it called for a cup of
Marilee,
oil.
I'm going to have to stop you because you're very bouncing and we're
Well,
really hard to understand.
I may not be able to go on. It's probably my internet. I'm not moving my microphone. So
We can
if you
hear you
can't,
now. It's a
It's
little
better
better.
now. Okay.
okay. Can you refrigerate oil like before you pour it? Or how do you feel room temperature oil when you're pouring?
Okay, so when I heard your question, I thought you said you needed a cup of oil for that marinade.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the blind kitchen, you could either use that auto measure spout, and I'd have to ask my smart speaker how many tablespoons of liquid are in it. But
Right.
refrigerating oil isn't ideal, but you could do it for a short time. And if your method is detecting the coldness of it versus room temperature. But we have measuring cups and spoons that we call wet measure cups and spoons. And what they are is they are just like they're stainless steel, just like you might have a standard set of 4 measuring cups and spoons at your home. But where these differ in 2 ways. Number one, they have dots on the handle that are part of the handle. They're not bump dots, they're not tactile paint, they are part of the handle. So if you count 4 dots with your finger, you're holding a quarter cup or a quarter teaspoon. If you
I
count
have
2,
the spoons.
you have we have the cups as well. So just for other listeners, so when you go to measure wet ingredients, we've turned the handle straight up towards the ceiling. So now it's more like a ladle. So if I need a cup of oil and what I'm going to do is, and I'm afraid of overflowing and I don't really have time to refrigerate or whatever, there's 12 right ways to do this, but this is the one we found most efficient, is I put that 1 cup into a pitcher, usually it's a measuring cup like a Pyrex, but it's got to be able to sit in the bottom of it. And then what I do is I pour the liquid in the oil or whatever liquid I'm needing, a cup of milk, a cup of whatever broth. I pour it into that spouted pitcher that I've chosen, and I'm going to make sure that I overflow the measuring cup, not the pitcher. I don't want it to flow out over onto my work tray, but I want to overflow it so that when I go to lift that measuring cup, if I lift straight up, I'm going to have my target bowl or pan as close to it as I can get to it, and I don't hear anything drop out. I know it is a level measurement because it was just under liquid. It has to be if I don't hear anything drop out. Then I dump it into the bowl that I want it to, and I come back, and of course I still got that overflow in that pitcher. I'm just going to take a funnel, put it back in the bottle that liquid came out of, and instead of having just the mouth of the bottle opening for a target, now depending on the funnel I use, I probably got a 3 or 4 inch target where I can dump it in, it'll go quickly, and that way I haven't wasted anything, and I'm also sure I got an accurate measurement. That's the best way that I've found.
Thank you. I appreciate your advice and information.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you too.
Hey, I'll be back.
Thank you.
Okay, Deborah, we have hit the 2-minute mark.
Okay.
And we have more hands. So guys, you're going to have to come back next time.
Okay. So I had a thing, somebody said my personal story or about culinary school, and I'm trying to remember what the other thing they said was. Somebody made a suggestion for next month. Well, I can do.
It was about flipping with a bad wrist.
Flipping. Yeah. Yeah. Which I don't think I have a full grasp on yet.
Yeah.
Would people like to hear things about seasoning? Raise your hands if you do. We're not going to call on you, but raise your hands if you'd like to hear about using herbs and spices and different things to season foods.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the hands are going up.
Okay, good, good. we may have to make that decision earlier in the meeting next time because I don't want to force things on people. But seasoning is a fun one. It's a good one. Okay, and if you have any questions about seasoning, write to me at info@theblindkitchen.com so I can be sure to address them as part of the presentation.
All right, Deborah, we are out of time, and thank you so much for an excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for all the work you did. I appreciate it.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night. Thank you.